The suspension components back here, you have two lower control arms. There's actually a really cool setup here in terms of how much they have integrated into that rear suspension setup. I'm literally planted now with a lot of engine noises. I'm literally buried into the floorboard there. Nothing is happening. G'day, I'm Paul. This is one of the most anticipated car launches or vehicle launches of this year. It is the BYD Shark 6. I'm getting attacked by flies today, so sorry about that. It's known globally as the Shark, but they call it the Shark 6 in Australia. This is so cheap and, well, so affordable. People don't like the word cheap. It is under $60,000, and that is a bargain these days because you do not get any car for under $60,000 that even has remotely close to what this has. So this is a plug-in hybrid. You've got a 30 kilowatt hour battery plus 2 electric motors. It'll tow, it'll go off-road, it'll do all that sort of stuff. This competes with stuff like the Ford Ranger plug-in hybrid, the GWM Cannon Alpha plug-in hybrid. So it really sort of sits in the mix there. They sold over 1,000 of these in the first 10 minutes and then the BYD website crashed. So there are a lot of people interested in these. Today we're going to do a detailed review of this plus some light off-roading. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this video, you can use the time codes that are on the screen. Or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below. We've also got a towing video where I literally have kicked the crap out of this car. A towing video where we tow at its absolute limits. And finally as well, we do a drag race with my Raptor. So when those videos go live, I'm going to put them in the description below. Make sure you subscribe so you can get notified when that happens as well. Now let's talk about the design. So you've got 3 colors to pick from. I think they'll expand the range eventually, and there is just one higher spec grade, which is the one you're looking at here. Sorry it's dirty, and also sorry that this video is kind of all over the place. We've had to shoot this across 2 days and it's been raining for part of it, so it's kind of a bit everywhere. In terms of the design, it looks a little bit familiar, doesn't it? So F-150 Lightning is what has inspired that sort of continuous LED setup here at the front and at the rear as well. But you're getting those full LED headlights, big BYD logo there. Camera there that forms part of that 360 camera setup. Now I'm going to run you through the dimensions and the capacity shortly, but if you are looking at accessories, a lot of people are now working on accessory kits for these, for things like bull bars and that kind of thing, but you're going to need to watch your limits, and I'll run you through those very soon. Now around the side here, what have we got? So we've got a set of highway terrain tyres. It's sitting on an 18-inch alloy wheel. This is very much a road tyre, so if you do want to do any off-roading, and we'll find out later on if this actually does any off-roading, but if you do want to do any off-roading, I'd be changing those tyres. These look like very much a tyre for reducing the fuel consumption. Some wheel arch cladding there. You've got these plastic side steps. Again, if you're going to do some proper off-roading, I'd be replacing those with rock sliders or something similar. Camera under there for the 360 camera. This is a big vehicle as well. Have a look at this. I'm sort of 185 centimeters tall. It kind of gives you an idea of where it sits there with that roof rail. Privacy glass there. You've got a charging port and also a fuel port. I'll run you through charging shortly and how that works. Disc brakes at the rear, and then come around to the back with me. Okay, so around the back here, you've got full LED tail lights that stretch all the way around there. BYD lettering on the tray there. You've got DMO all-wheel drive. That signifies that this is a plug-in hybrid. You've got BYD Shark 6 lettering. Under the rear, you have independent rear suspension, which is cool because you've got a motor on the front and a motor on the rear. There is no drive line that runs down the center of the car, so you can get away with stuff like independent rear suspension. It'll be interesting to see when we go and do our light off-roading to see how much articulation we get with that, because it isn't traditionally what you see on utes in this segment. Beneath here, 2.5 ton braked towing capacity. You drop the tailgate by pressing this 2 times. There you go, that drops down there with a little hydraulic arm there as well. Now let's talk about payload. You've got 790 kilos to work with, a 3.5 ton GVM and a GCM of 5,750 kilos. And in terms of the axle limits I mentioned earlier, your front axle has a limit of 1,607 kilos and it comes in at 1,488. So it gives you a bit of an idea of what you have left to play with. And at the rear, it's a much better situation. 1,222 before you add anything in, with a limit of just under 1,900 kilos. In terms of the tray dimensions itself, 1,520 long, 1,500 wide at its widest point, and then just over 500 mil deep. Now the reason there is a power point on this side is because you have vehicle to load. So you can actually use this car to power accessories. So it's a really cool setup because if you're out camping or something like that, you can actually then just plug things into the vehicle and use part of that 30 kilowatt hour battery capacity to run things at your campsite. So it's a pretty good setup. There are a couple of flaws that I'll run you through when we're inside the cabin, but for all intents and purposes, this is a bona fide ute in terms of the capacities that you have access to here. And most importantly, it has a shark fin aerial. Now, let me know in the comments section below, what do you reckon about pricing? What do you reckon about the design? I am keen for your feedback. And also, what do you reckon about getting me something that gets rid of these flies? Okay, so we are inside the Shark. This is what the key looks like. You've got lock, unlock, a button there to drop the tailgate, remote start, and then BYD on the back. Just want to call out a couple of things. A lot of you have asked, why haven't we reviewed the BYD Shark yet? Is it because we're paid by like other car brands to not review it? No, that's not the case at all. Basically, the car isn't ADR approved, which means it can't be driven on the road. So we've had to truck the car here to do this test today, and it's a pre-production car as well, so it's not one of the production cars. But in addition to that, they've held a couple of events for these vehicles, and normally these events are sort of above the board and just with journalists there to assess cars, but this time around, I had like probably 15 emails from a number of different agencies attached to the BYD brand in their marketing departments trying to pay me to attend the event as an influencer. So obviously I don't attend events as an influencer because if I'm reviewing the product, it's not going to be an accurate review, but that kind of explains to you why there was a lot of shouty influencers at the original BYD Shark event. It looked fantastic, but we want to do our proper testing here, and this is the location that we try and test all of these cars, and that's why it has taken so long. And no, I have not been paid to do this review, or any review for that matter. And I know I'm labouring on this point a little bit, but typically the way that it works with car companies is they'll hold a car launch. It's cheaper to have all the cars in one place and to fly people in, and they will pay for our flights and accommodation to do that. But every car brand does that. That's sort of standard across the board. What isn't standard though is paying people money to attend the event, because that really gives you quite a biased outlook on the product if you're getting paid to be there. I haven't yet seen any posts from that event that show that it was a paid partnership or an ad. So yeah. Anyway, what does it look like in here? This is the thing that blows me away, right? The price. The price is cheap for what you're getting. There is a 30 kilowatt hour battery attached to this vehicle, and there is a fixed cost for batteries. Like they're not, you know, even if you make them in bulk, the core components still cost money. So to fit a vehicle with a 30 kilowatt hour battery, 2 electric motors, and a vehicle capable of delivering this kind of technology for under $60,000 is genuinely remarkable. And it shows you how much profit margin there is with some of the brands that are manufacturing utes in Thailand, for example, where you could be paying 70 grand for a Hilux or a Ranger or something like that, and they must be making a lot of money out of those. So just something worth pointing out, because this does look really nice. You've got that big screen in the center there that rotates. I'll show you that soon. Screen ahead of the driver, a head-up display, heated and cooled seats. It's genuinely jam-packed with everything you could possibly need. And this is a higher spec grade as well. Apparently they're going to be doing a lower spec version of this car, which will be cheaper and have some of the features stripped out, but just gives you an idea of where they're heading with this product. Premium and well priced. What are the touch points like? Well, nice in the center there, not too bad on the door as well. How soft are they? We've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin. If you do want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. Now, build quality, what is it like? It is solid as a tank. It all feels okay. I'll be curious to see what this is like in the long term. This is what the door slam sounds like. Now, door slam's really great, but when you do have all the doors closed and you close one of them, there's a lot of pressure inside the cabin that builds up, and it can be a little bit tricky to close the door, but aside from that, it all feels really good in here. Now, let's talk about infotainment. I love technology, and I love this technology layout. So this is the latest version of BYD's infotainment operating system. It is so fast. It just reminds me of what Tesla does. Like, if you hop in a Tesla, everything is fast. It's not like they engineered it for the CPU to be operating at like 99% capacity from the factory. It feels like there's lots of headroom, and as a result of that, when you roll out updates, everything is nice and quick. So 15.6 inch standard screen. This rotates, so it's one of those sort of gimmicky type things. Maybe it's not a gimmick, I don't know. Do you drive a BYD? Do you find that feature useful? And which orientation do you run it in? I'm curious to know. You can set wallpapers. You can also then switch the home screen to different functions like mapping or whatever you want. So there's a fair bit of functionality there. Then you've got shortcuts down the bottom here as well that you can set. And then several sub-menus for adjusting the car's settings as well. So it's a Pretty cool looking setup. In terms of smartphone mirroring, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, look at this. Wireless CarPlay is just so snappy and easy to use. So pretty impressed with that as well. On the audio front, you've got a 12-speaker DIN audio sound system. The sound system is great. DIN Audio is a great brand, so they've obviously partnered with someone for decent music quality. It's also got this voice recognition feature, which works quite well. So I'll show you how this works. Open the driver's window. Close the driver's window. Oh, let's try confuse it here. Open the driver's window halfway. That's pretty cool. Close the driver's window.
Okay, I've raised the temperature by 1 degree in the driver's seat.
Thank you. I didn't say that, but that is all good. So for the most part, that works pretty well. So yeah, really nice sort of setup there, and it's very easy to use. Screen ahead of the driver, 10.25-inch display. It just gives you all the critical functions. You've got different sort of settings to pick from there. You can have different displays there, and then also the screen changes depending on which terrain mode you're in and which drive mode you're in, and you select those here on the steering wheel. So really sort of decent setup on both of those fronts. Now, safety tech. So autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. You have blind spot monitoring built into the wing mirror. You've got the driver monitoring system, which has proven to be a little bit annoying. You can switch all that stuff off, but by default, it turns back on every single time you start the car, which is frustrating. It's a requirement for safety in 2024 and 2025, so it's one of those silly things I don't really agree with, but you have to have, unfortunately. You've got radar cruise control with semi-autonomous steering that we will test later on, and on the parking front, you have front and rear parking sensors with a 360 camera that you can activate on the steering wheel. I'll show you what that looks like. Wow, quality of that is fantastic, so really high resolution. So you've got side views there, front view, rear view. Wow, that's and a transparent view as well. So yeah, I really like that. You can see they've put a lot of effort into that display. There's some settings here you can pick from. Oh, you can change the body color too. Nice, very good. And this is what the horn sounds like. Moving on to practicality, and we'll start off with connectivity. You've got a 50-watt wireless phone charger there. The other great thing as well is that you have cooling there, so your phone isn't going to melt when it's wirelessly charging. A USB A and C port in the center console here with a 12-volt outlet. Worth keeping in mind as well that this has vehicle to load too, so you can actually power devices external to the vehicle. So in here, if you go to your vehicle settings, the energy settings is quite interesting. So what you can do is set the vehicle to save battery capacity while you're driving. So instead of it sort of depleting, it will try and save the battery and use more of your internal combustion engine to drive the vehicle. It tends to work okay, but sometimes it can just not work. I don't really understand how or why. And you can only lock it to 70%. You can't go any higher than that. Your vehicle to load also stops working below a certain low percentage as well. So I think there's probably a couple of software tweaks they can make with that to make it a little bit better. But for the most part, they've actually done a really decent job there in terms of some of these vehicle to load and also charging systems. Now on the storage front, you've got cup holders here. You've got a little bit of storage down the front there. But outside of that, there's not really many places to put things here. The center console is huge, which is great. It's nice and deep. Let's have a look at the glove box is not too bad as well. You've got that little storage nook there too. A sunnies holder up the top, so it's not that bad, but this whole center section here is dedicated to the gear stick and other sort of auxiliary buttons. It'd be nice to have just a little bit more storage in the center there. Now, comfort. You've got dual zone automatic climate control. You've got heated and cooled seats. Steering offers tilt and reach adjustment. And on our reach test, all of that stuff is easy to reach. Your seats are electrically adjustable for the driver and front passenger as well. So you can go backwards, forwards. Your backrest can go backwards and forwards. You can lift the front of the seat, the back of the seat, and you also have lumbar adjustment as well. Now, second row. This is interesting. I'm going to run you through how this works. So there is no storage under here like you would find in a typical dual cab ute. What you're going to find under here is an inverter for the AC and DC charger. So that sits under here. And over there, you've got the starter battery, which is just a small battery to kick the vehicle over. Now, they did the sort of that launch thing I was telling you about at Broken Hill, where there's a lot of red dust. And it's fine to have red dust outside the car, but not inside the car. So the fact that that is covered in red dust tells me that that isn't sealed very well. So like I said, pre-production car, maybe they'll fix it for the production version, but that's not great to see. Now, drop this down. Behind here, You've got access to your 3 top tether points and what appears to be a subwoofer, the jack and tyre change equipment. See how much room we've got here. I'm curious to see. Wow, that's pretty good. Have a look at that. I've got really decent knee room. Toe room's fantastic. Headroom's really good as well. I don't know how they've managed to, because in terms of size, yes, this is a big vehicle, but it's not significantly bigger than other dual cab utes in this segment. But this feels way roomier than everything else in the segment. So they've actually done a really good job here in terms of packaging everything, which is great. So grab handles there, you've got lights up the top there, you've got a little bit of storage there, you have power outlets, so what's that? 10 amps, 230 volts. That's pretty good. So that's like a 2.4 kilowatt power outlet, which is good. USB A and C charging. Center armrest there with a couple of cup holders as well, and then map pockets too. Now our window test, does it go all the way down? Let's have a look. It's auto up and down. Very good. Now let's talk about charging and batteries and all that sort of stuff. So it actually does AC and DC charging, which is pretty impressive. So AC charging at 7 kilowatts and DC charging at up to 55 kilowatts. These flies are insane. And then in addition to that, your battery capacity is 30 kilowatt hours or thereabouts. So that gives you around 100 kilometres of driving range on the WLTP cycle. Now, sorry about the audio, but we thought we'd quickly record this on the phone. We've got the Shark up on the hoist here. Sometimes we'll stick a car up here, just have a look underneath. And I thought this was one worth sharing because they've done some good stuff and some not so good stuff under here. And I thought we'd start at the front. You've got underbody protection that runs from the front to the rear, primarily for battery protection, but also to protect your motor and other sort of sensitive components up the front. This is probably configured in the wrong way. This should overlap this plate, and you find it all the way down the vehicle that you're getting these exposed sections here, which shouldn't be there. And if you consider a situation like driving through sand or other sort of debris that can build up, this will catch all of that and then it will sit in this section here. And it just makes it hard to get rid of that stuff because you're never really going to be looking under there. So just something sort of worth keeping in mind. Come and have a look a little further down the car here. So here you've got all the protection for the battery. Now, this is sort of thick paneling here, but the battery section actually comes over and tilts up. So if you are going to hit anything that is lower than the battery, it's all going to be at the front or at that rear section. It's never really going to be in this section here. So in terms of the location of this, it's good. The protection is good as well. When we were doing rock driving yesterday, which a little bit confusingly, you're going to see in the video coming up soon, we did make contact with this underbody here, but doesn't seem to have left any damage, which is good. The exhaust is interesting. It runs down the side of the car there. I could have kind of done like a side exit exhaust maybe, like a Cobra. That would have looked pretty cool. But yeah, this exhaust runs down the side of the car and then has a muffler in this section. The packaging is actually really impressive here in terms of how much they've been able to fit in. But have a look at this part around the back, which I think is probably the most impressive. The suspension components back here. You have 2 lower control arms, which you think of a dual cab ute these days, it's got leaf spring suspension, a coil spring and a damper, whereas this has 2 lower control arms. You've got an alloy upper control arm there, one for the spring and then one for the damper up the top there. You have an anti-roll bar here as well. There's actually a really cool setup here in terms of how much they have integrated into that rear suspension setup. So that is kind of what gives this vehicle the ability to handle a bit more like a car as opposed to a dual cab ute. What else have we got? And you can see the exhaust sort of exits out the back here, and then you have your spare tyre up here as well. So yeah, pretty interesting setup here. If there's anything else you want to see from under here, let us know in the comment section below and we'll see what we can capture when we get the car back. All right, so we're on the road. Now, this is an interesting experience because most of the dual cab utes we drive are diesel, so they make a noise that is clattery and annoying. This, on the other hand, being a plug-in hybrid, is often running with the internal combustion engine switched off. And there are a number of different drive modes here. I'm going to run through in as much detail as I can. Sorry if it bores you, but you can skip ahead this little bit if you're not interested in how this works, but I do find this quite fascinating. So under the bonnet, 1.5 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. It's then mated to 2 electric motors, one that sits on the front axle, one that sits on the rear axle. There is no physical drive line between the front and the rear, so they are 2 completely independent units. That is different to the way that some other vehicles operate, such as the plug-in hybrid that Ford is about to launch in the Ranger. It actually has the same I guess, drivetrain components as a regular Ford Ranger, with the exception that there is an electric motor sandwiched between the driveline that runs down the center of the vehicle and the transmission as well. This is a totally different setup, and this setup here is actually way more efficient because you're able to run the electric motors at times when it is advantageous to run electric motors, such as at low speed or when taking off. And then when you do need that extra grunt, you can actually have the whole system running together. So you're getting a few sort of benefits there. In addition to that, the battery size here is enormous compared to something like the Ranger, which is much smaller, has less of a driving range as well. Now, what does all that mean? So the internal combustion engine makes a little over 100 kilowatts of power, a little over 250 newton meters of torque. So nothing to write home about. And the reason for that is you typically want to pair a small internal combustion engine with a more powerful electric system so that you're providing the charging that you need from that internal combustion engine is required, but for most of the time you're actually running the vehicle through those front and rear electric motors. In terms of the electric motors, the front one produces 170 kilowatts of power and 310 newton meters of torque, which is absolutely mega. The rear one, 150 kilowatts and 340 newton meters of torque. So those numbers are really healthy. And that is a combined 321 kilowatts of power and 650 newton meters of torque. Genuinely bonkers numbers. Now, what does all that mean in terms of fuel economy? Well, it's an interesting one because BYD's been smart enough to not try and trick you into thinking that this thing uses 1 litre per 100 Ks, which is typically what manufacturers do when they sell a plug-in hybrid. And that is just a fanciful number and is just a technicality of the testing. What they do here is actually tell you that the fuel economy is 7.9 litres per 100 Ks. Now, the reason I'm not going to show you the fuel economy here, we've had to truck this car here. This doesn't have ADR approval yet in Australia, so we can't drive it on a public road. So I haven't actually driven it in realistic circumstances, so I don't know exactly what the fuel economy would be like, but I think 8 litres per 100 Ks is a pretty safe estimate for a vehicle this size with hybrid system. And according to BYD as well, it's going to consume just over 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres when you're running on electric alone. So that is a fair bit because this is heavy. I mean, this is tipping the scales at over 2.5 tonnes, so it is a monster of a vehicle. Now, the thing I'll get to as well before I tell you what this feels like to drive is the different driving scenarios you can have. So there's a button down here that allows you to switch between electric and hybrid. When you're on electric, internal combustion engine is off and you're running entirely on electric alone. And if I give this a stab now, it actually accelerates really nicely. It doesn't feel underdone, which is often what you can find with plug-in hybrid vehicles. They don't really have such strong electric components, whereas this is quite sort of sharp and ready to rumble as well. It does regen, you can switch between low and high, so all of that stuff's great. When you switch over to hybrid though, it really just looks at what you're doing in terms of your driving, and then it will go with the most efficient way of operating the vehicle. And there's a number of drive scenarios that it has depending on what the battery capacity is at. There will be some scenarios where it's running on entirely electric alone. There will be some scenarios where it's running a combination of electric and internal combustion in series or parallel. And then there are some combinations where it's actually using the internal combustion engine to drive the front wheels as well. Now, in that scenario, it is due to an efficiency gain. So it is at certain speeds, you are more efficient running an internal combustion engine than you are electric. So it all just depends on a number of those factors, and that is where they come up with this system. And the system is quite a similar setup to what they have in the Sea Lion 6. So in terms of the configuration of it and how it chooses between those modes, that is where you're going to find that. In addition to all of that, you can also then save energy in the vehicle. Now, this doesn't really work that well. You can tell the vehicle to basically keep energy at a certain level, but I found that it doesn't really charge all that quickly, and it doesn't really respect any of these parameters that you set here on the screen. So that probably does need a little bit of work. Now, what does all that feel like behind the wheel? So I've left it in hybrid mode here. I'm just going to give it a little stab. Yeah, so now it's running internal combustion and the electric motors, and it does feel nice and punchy. Like it's not like a Ranger Raptor in terms of it being quite explosive once it's moving, but it does sort of get up and move pretty nicely. You've also got drive modes there that then change the way it feels depending on which drive mode you pick. So if I slot that over to Sport and give it a punch now, it's far more responsive. It's giving us a whole lot more torque there and it feels far sportier behind the wheel. But in none of these modes is the engine thrashy and annoying here inside the cabin. It's always actually quite a serene place to be seated. Now let's talk about the ride. I'm going to crank the speed up to 130 k's an hour. Like I said, haven't had a chance to drive this in the city. We'll get this back again once it is approved for road use, but we'll see what it's like across our sine waves at 130. We test all cars back to back in the same way, and this is one of the tests that we do to simulate overtaking on a country road and hitting a consecutive set of sine waves. Utes typically don't do well here. This really does quite well. So the ride is surprisingly comfortable for a vehicle this size. And you've got to remember as well that you've got 30 odd kilowatt hours worth of battery pack here as well that is really sort of weighing the car down and giving you that nice feel over consecutive bumps like that. Let's see what it's like on our rough road. Let's pretend you're out in the middle of nowhere in the outback and you hit one of these corrugated crappy roads, or even just literally any road in Melbourne or Sydney. We do this at 90 k's an hour to see what the ride is like on rougher terrain. I can tell you immediately that this is quite comfortable up the front here. Sean's saying it's bouncy in the back, but it's good up the front. Here's our condensed sine wave. Yeah, see, that's where it sort of comes apart a little bit. The condensed sine wave really introduces a lot of vibration through the car, and it kind of floats over the top, and that's where if you do have any steering inputs, it's going to skate over corrugations. So not ideal, but not the absolute end of the world. Okay, time to go for a bit of a faster drive. I'm going to slot this into Sport. We have Eco, Normal and Sport. Obviously this is not a sports car, but we test all cars back to back in the same way to see what they feel like in terms of their handling ability. This thing is moving along really nicely for such a big, heavy vehicle. In a straight line, it sort of gets along. All right. It's actually surprisingly good. We've got the stability control sort of popping on and off there, but for a vehicle this big, this is pretty damn impressive. Feels like it has some kind of a torque vectoring system there on the rear axle as well. Like I can feel when I get onto the throttle, it's kind of feeding me a bit of torque to that rear. It doesn't feel unnatural. I'm genuinely surprised by this. I've noticed previously that BYD brakes don't really feel all that confidence inspiring, so we'll see what it's like at the end of our straight here. The screen is just randomly turning around when there's a higher G corner. Okay, here's our back stroke. Give it a little punch here. See, it's already run out of steam, so I'm pinned to the board here and it's barely gaining any speed at all. Yeah, okay. Interesting. I'll be keen to see what this is like once we do some towing, because that's where you're going to find the biggest issue. One lap of the track here and then to find it's already sort of running out of puff isn't exactly the most confidence-inspiring thing in the world. But if I go for that throttle one more time now, it's back in action. So, yeah, all right. Let's see how durable it is once we stick a trailer on it, because that is where you're going to find the limits to a system like this. If you're towing a caravan or a smaller trailer up a long, constant incline and it starts running out of steam, you're going to be relying on a 1.5 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, which for moving a vehicle that weighs 2,700 kilos probably won't exactly cut the mustard. Let's talk about visibility. So this is a big vehicle, there's no denying that, but I can see clearly over the bonnet there. Nice big wing mirrors, blind spot monitor built into those, and then clear visibility out the rear as well. Okay, so let's see how well the semi-autonomous steering function works. We test this at 70 k's an hour on our bowl here, and kind of just gives us a really good understanding of...
ICC activated.
Thank you. Kind of gives us a good understanding of how well it will keep the vehicle in its lanes. We use the 3 outer lanes, and we'll see how we go. So first lane here, it is doing a pretty decent job. No dramas there. We'll jump over to the next lane. It'll get progressively harder because the car needs to input more steering torque to hold it within its lane. Kind of gives you an idea of what it will be like on the open road. It's okay here. It's kind of getting a little close to that line, but now it's sort of moved itself back into the center, which is good. All right, let's see how it goes in the outermost lane. This is probably the trickiest for it to do. Okay, we'll see if it'll activate. It doesn't look like it's going to activate at all. No. All right, so pass in lane 1 and 2. And then it's a no for the 3rd lane. Are you looking for some advice but don't want a hard sell? Well, I am here to help. Well, CarExpert is here to help. All you need to do is go to Google and type in "Help Me CarExpert" or scan the QR code on the screen. It'll take you to our website. CarExpert is a big business. It's not just me here doing videos. We even have a concierge team in Australia who is there to help you figure out which car to buy. We can even put you in touch with one of our friendly dealers as well. It is obligation free. You can talk to someone in Australia who will guide you through the entire process. You can talk to my mate Pete or even Sophia. All you need to do is just Google "Help Me CarExpert" or use the QR code and we will hook you up with the right car. Okay, time to do some performance testing, and you know what? We're going to do a drag race with my Ranger Raptor as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and you press the bell icon so you can see exactly how that goes, just for fun. Okay, I'm going to slot this into sport mode. Doesn't have launch control. We'll turn ESC off just so we can get off the line there in a hurry, and I guess we'll see what happens. So we're going to go 0 through to 120. That'll allow us to capture 80 to 120 overtaking as well. And then we'll come back and do a brake from 100. So here we go. So I'm trying to brake boost now, but I don't know that it's doing anything. So here we go. Nice. Nice and strong off the line there. You can see the performance counter down there, 320 kilowatts. So there's 120. Very nice. It is so smooth. Once it gets up and moving, it is really smooth. So let's see how that went. 0 to 100, 5.72 seconds, and 80 to 120, 3.91. So pretty decent number there for 80 to 120. Even the 0 to 100 is fantastic there. I did try this a few times, and the fastest combination was basically auto hold, ESC off, sport mode. Every other mode had some kind of slowdown to it, so that was the quickest way to do it. But let's head back and do a stop from 100. So there's 100. Okay, here we go. So 100 to 0, 3.21 seconds, 43.84 meters. So not really an amazing stopping distance. You want to, yeah, look, I mean, it's about on par what we see with like most dual cab utes that have a highway terrain or a chunkier sort of highway terrain or all-terrain tyre. So it's not too bad, but yeah, ultimately you're trying to stop a 2.7 tonne mass, so it is going to need some room to stop. So yeah, it's good, but not amazing. Now, importantly, how quickly does it go in reverse? Here we go. Okie dokie. Oh, there we go. A very respectable 27 kilometres an hour. Okay, let's do a little bit of light off-roading. I'm excited to see how this goes because this is kind of unique the way this vehicle's set up, and you know, in theory, an electric vehicle should be far superior off-road to a vehicle with mechanical locking diffs because you have far more granular control over your electric motors. Like, you know, it's way more than what you can do with a mechanical locking diff. So I'll be curious to see how this goes and how much effort and time they've put into the traction control. So I'll run you through the high level specs first. So you've got a ground clearance of 230 mil. So really good. You don't have any diffs and stuff like that hanging down. You have an approach angle of 31 degrees. That's the angle of the face you can approach before you hit something, so the front. And then 19.3 degrees for your departure angle, which is the same but in reverse. Weighting depth of 700 mil, which is also pretty impressive. In terms of the rest of the equipment, you've got a hill descent control here. And outside of that, you've got a couple of drive modes, and you can switch stability control off as well. So I'll be curious to see how this goes. And a really good camera here too, which we'll check when we go for our descent for hill descent control. Now, first up, normally we do our offset mogul here in two-wheel drive, but we don't have two-wheel drive available to us here, so I'm just going to leave it in its standard setting and let's just see how it goes. So the whole premise of this is that we kick a rear wheel off the ground, and that basically puts us into a condition where it's forcing the vehicle to use its traction controls. So it's that one just there. I'm just going to lean on the throttle now and we'll see what happens. So I'm just looking at that rear wheel. That's not moving at all. It's sending all the torque to the front axle. Look at this. That is unreal. I literally was just leaning on the throttle. It just walked straight out of that. That is so cool. So that is the advantage of electric motors. We're on highway terrain tyres. Yes, it's not muddy or anything like that. Well, it is a little bit, but not in that section. But this just shows you that with electric motors, you can do so much more with your traction controls. So let's go back in this direction. So in this direction, we've got the same condition where it sort of kicks up that front wheel. I'll actually just stick it in one of these drive modes. So you've got this little spin wheel on the side here. Terrain modes, you've got mountain, snowland, sandland, muddy land. Let's go with muddy land. It changes the appearance of the display there and also tailors the traction controls. So let's just see how that works. You don't have the issue of having wide turning circles with diff locks. Okay, so we'll just line up our little hole here. Drop that rear wheel over. Just rest it on the concrete, just around there somewhere. So lean on the throttle now. So I can feel traction control biting there. I'll lean a little bit more on the throttle. Yeah, struggling a bit more this time. But again, just lean on the throttle and through it goes. Very, very good. I'm so impressed with that. Okay, now it's time for our hill. It has been raining here a fair bit. It's dry today, but this has been chopped up really nicely. So I think this should be a pretty decent challenge for it. I'll put this back into muddy land. Funny names. So what I'll do first up is just go with gradual throttle all the way to the top. Then I'll come back for another go, except when I come back around, I'll come to a full stop. We'll see if it's got a hill hold and then try again. But yeah, let's see how we go. No low range. It's just weird doing this without low range with a sort of electric-y sort of car. So let's see what happens. Turn the parking sensors off. So constant throttle. Okay, we're coming to a stop there. I'm now at full throttle and we're not moving at all. It's doing some stuff there with the traction control, but yeah, my foot is literally buried into the firewall there. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go with a bit more pace there and just see if that makes any difference for us. Okay, here we go. A little bit more pace. Again, constant throttle. And now full throttle. I'm literally buried into the firewall. Nothing there at all. So that's definitely not good. I'm going to try and go over to mountain land, which was the other setting there. It could be that that one there was affecting us. So mountain land, again, constant throttle. Let's see how it goes. Okay, letting us have a little bit more there. I'm now at full throttle. I'm literally planted now. There's a lot of engine noises, a lot of traction control noises, but we're not going anywhere. I'm literally buried into the floorboard there. Nothing is happening. It might one day work itself out, but it doesn't look like it. So what I'll do, last thing I'm going to try here is just turn traction control off. Normally I wouldn't bother trying this many times, but it's a very different setup. I've never done this in a sort of plug-in hybrids. I don't really know how it works. So I'll go over here and we'll switch ESC off, just so we're in charge of it now. We'll just see what happens. Same thing again, gradual throttle. This time there is no traction control running. It just sits there spinning its wheels. Yeah, that's pretty pointless. Okay, so that's pretty disappointing. So, I can't really explain what's going on there. So it's got over 300 kilowatts of power. It should have more than enough power to get up something like this. But the problem is it's slowing itself down, and then the traction control is just confusing itself, and it's stopping it from moving, and that is just not a good situation to be in if you need to get up a hill. So what I'll do now, I'm just gonna get stuck into it, and we'll just hopefully make it up there. So here we go. A little bit more generous on the throttle here. Look at this. Oh, I only just made that. So yeah, Not loving that at all. So yeah, pretty disappointed by that. All right, we've got our little mud puddle here. Let's jump through that and then try a hill descent control. This is the car. Okay, let's line up for our hill descent. Okay, so for our hill descent, we've got a hill descent control here. That's now enabled. And I'm going to also press the middle button here to look at the camera. All right, so I've got the camera running. Quality of that's great. I can see the tyre marks there to show where we're going. Okay, hill descent control is on. Just let go of the throttle. See what it did there when we were coming down. It also doesn't feel like I can adjust the speed using the cruise control. When we were coming down, the back kicked out slightly. Systems that aren't tuned very well do that, and you can imagine that is not great if you're going down a big, long, steep hill and it kicks you sideways, because you don't then have any control over the vehicle's direction. So that's a system that they probably need to spend a little bit more time tuning. Now, last thing we do here is we come to a stop, and then try and take off. So let's see how well that works. All right, so I'm on the brakes there. I'm going to see if it has a hill hold, then I'll try take off. So it's got a hill hold. Get on the throttle. Oh, come on, baby. No, it's again just come to a complete stop here. Pretty disappointed with that. Okay, rock time. Let's see how it goes over the rocks. There is no sort of rock mode, so I'll just sort of crawl it over the rocks here. We'll see what happens. Yeah, one of the things that I have concerns about with vehicles like this is just penetrating the battery with a rock. And the interesting thing as well is it's not letting me ride the brake with the throttle here, which is really annoying. I'm going to just try maybe one of these other settings just to see if it makes any difference. Yeah, that's really annoying, because you can nicely regulate your speed by riding the brake with the throttle, both for ascents and descents and for stuff like rocks. And right now it's not letting me do that, which means it's just running away from me, and it's just not very good, because you'll end up in scenarios where it'll get a run up and you might jump up and then land on a rock. So yeah, I think that definitely needs some calibration work so they can prioritize the pedal operation for a rock mode of some description. Okay, so there it is, BYD Shark. What do you reckon? Now, we do have more content. We've got a drag race with my Ranger Raptor. I thought, why not? We've got a towing video as well to see how this performs when towing. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to see those. I'll leave links in the description below when they're live. What do we reckon? Look, for this kind of price, this is incredible value for money. Even with the downfalls that we've discovered, this is such good value for money. The interior is fantastic. It's got loads of features. It's nice and fast, it's efficient, etc., etc. So all that stuff is great. Where it is let down though is finer stuff like that, where you'll find other manufacturers like your Toyotas, your Isuzus, your Fords are really spending a lot of time and energy on traction controls, off-road ability. It's when it really starts getting a little hairier that's where the investment counts. And I think that probably fallen a little bit short there in terms of off-roading. If you're never going to off-road this car though, you're just going to drive it on road. I mean, you cannot go wrong for this sort of price. So let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. We haven't done the towing yet, so we're shooting that later today. I'll be keen to see how it performs when towing. And yeah, I think this could be a pretty good purchase if you have put your money down for one. So let me know in the comments section below, what do you reckon? I'm keen for your feedback. But until next time, take it easy.